Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of my Facebook Live UX Audits. Today, we're going to change up the format just a little bit. I know last week we started to go through some of the Denver Blogger Club's websites, but today I wanted to take a brief pause from that to consider not just websites in terms of user design, but physical products. And this particular UX audit is going to be actually a rant of sorts about a company that I have loved so much and given so much of my money to, but has just recently disappointed me. So you might have heard of them. It's a little company called Apple. They recently made, actually I guess it's not so recent anymore, they recently released their line of iPhone X's, which started with the iPhone X, and then now they have the XR, XS, like all these other things. And I've been talking with a lot of people who have also upgraded. I think I had the iPhone 7 before I upgraded, and kind of the consensus is that a lot of us are really disappointed with the latest version of this phone, especially given the fact that it has also become the most expensive version of this phone. Whenever you upgrade your phone, it's always going to be expensive because you have to, even if you don't have like a specific upgrade fee, it's just the fact that you're getting new hardware, and you might have to pay a small price, whatever that subsidized price is within your carrier. But with the iPhone X, there really wasn't a whole lot of subsidization. I think the way it works for me is that I pay the full amount, but I just get to break it up into monthly payments. So it's something like $50 a month or something like that, which isn't a big deal, especially because I use my phone for business, and so I can deduct it as part of my tax deductions. But the fact that you're paying more for something that doesn't work better, which we'll get into in a second, is something that really bugs me. So let's take a step back for just a second here. This whole topic is prompted by my love for one of the best books in the world. It's called The Design of Everyday Things. And when I first started thinking about user experience design, it was very much as a result of having read this book and taken the time to understand how people create the things that we interact with on like a physical sense, and then how that then translates to how we interact with things online. So I think that, regardless of whether or not you create physical products, there's so much that we can learn about how people interact with them. And so that's why we're going to take a step back from websites for just a minute here to look at a physical product, which still obviously has all these online connectivities and, things like that, whatever. So let's talk about the iPhone X. So I bought this new phone. Honestly, my iPhone 7 was working fine. I'm sure everybody's been there. I'm the type of person who I don't care when the new iPhone comes out. I'm not going to run out and get it. I've always been the type of person who doesn't need that instant gratification, especially if it means that waiting is going to drop the price, which of course has not been the case with the iPhone X, at least not to my knowledge, and definitely not at the time that I bought it. But I bought it mostly because I was just ready. It was time in my contract. I wasn't going to have to pay any additional fees to do it, minus, of course, just the fact that you have to pay for the phone unsubsidized, at least with this new one. But anyway, so it was time. I wanted a better camera too, which kind of fits in with my work, doing social media for people, having a blog, doing blog stuff for other people. It just made sense to have a nicer camera to document things that would be relevant to me and my clients and all that good stuff. And I'm the type of person who really just loves looking at old photographs. I don't think you could see, well, here, let me show you something. So if you can see up there by that map, one of the things that Dan and I, my fiance, do is we like to print canvases from our trips. And so I like to have really solid, beautiful images to work with so that I can continue this tradition and to create like other things. Like we have coasters. I used to make like phone covers with photos and stuff like that. So there are reasons for having a nicer camera, and the iPhone X or the iPhone 10, whatever you want to call it, undoubtedly has the best camera of an iPhone so far. But here's the thing. I think after this iPhone, after I detail some of the things that have really pissed me off about it, I don't think I'm going to do iPhones anymore, because if this is any indication of where Apple's going with, what's sort of their golden child product, then it doesn't look like it's going to get any better from here. So a couple years ago, I read the Steve Jobs biography, which is an awesome read for anybody who wants to really get in the head of this company that has been so innovative, detailing the journey of what some would consider to be a cruel but very, smart and obviously innovative man. Steve Jobs, I would say above anything else, when he worked at Apple, championed the user experience and how important it was to get the keyboard right, or, to deploy a certain action in a certain way. He was obsessive to the point that it was really scary for the people around him to keep up. But he made, even though I'm sure it hurt them, he made people do extraordinary things that they were amazed that they were able to do after the fact, but also like hated their lives while they were doing it. I'm not saying that his leadership style was without issues. All I'm saying is that his obsession with the user experience went above anything else. And so the problem with how things are going today is that Apple's obsession with profit has now superseded the need for having this amazing user experience. And I think that it's reflected in some of the design problems, the user experience design issues with the iPhone X that I'm going to detail for you now that I've done that big lead up. So one of the things that I think is like one of the most obvious issues that Steve Jobs would have never let happen is when you take a screenshot, you're supposed to push these two buttons, the top like sound button as well as the like screen on off button. So what happens though is when I'm holding my iPhone and I'm just trying to turn my screen off, usually I accidentally also deploy that button that makes it into a screenshot, and then I take like stupid screenshots of whatever's on my screen, which is usually just this goofy background picture from this Chuck Palahniuk event we went to a while back. And it's just so like the way your hand works, I can't believe that they wouldn't have figured this out during testing when they were redesigning, like the home screen and how you interact with it and the buttons and all that stuff. I can't believe that they wouldn't have figured that out. So, Steve Jobs would have never let that happen. Another thing that I've personally noticed is when you go in and you customize your phone, you can set up like what publications you want to get notifications from, Apple News. But what happens is when I'm not on Wi-Fi, if I'm just on like LTE or whatever, Apple will send me a notification when I try to open that article that says you're not connected to the internet, so you can't see this article, even though I'm able to scroll or, look at anything else on my phone, on the internet, Facebook, Twitter, email, whatever. But I can't open that story. And then what happens is, I'm already like auditing the things that I want to look at, and I delete notifications for news articles I'm just not interested in. But the ones that I do like leave there and then click on that I want to read, I really want to read. And then, the way that the news interface is, which is like an iOS issue versus a hardware issue, I can't find the frickin' story again. So then I have to go into Google, try to remember like what the exact words were for the heading or the headline, so that I can find it. And it's just very freaking frustrating. So that's another thing, Apple News. This, I'm not going to necessarily blame on Apple, but I will say that it has not happened with an iPhone for me before. It might be a carrier issue, but oftentimes when I'm trying to use my phone, that little Wi-Fi signal will just drop out of nowhere. It's only ever happened on my iPhone 10, and then it's like LTE, and so I'll be scrolling, just going on Instagram or going on Facebook and just doing mindless scrolling, and then, 30 minutes later, I'm like, oh shit, I wasn't on Wi-Fi, even though I'm in my house, and clearly, like the router's literally right here, and I scroll from right over there on the couch. So, silly things. Verizon actually did a thing that I kind of appreciate recently, which is when I went to upgrade to this phone. Not only did they say I was eligible for more data for the same price, interesting that they waited until I was about to cancel, but whatever. Anyway, they also told me that there was a way to have they would throttle my data after I hit that limit without cutting me off data, instead of just automatically going over and having to pay for that overage. So that was a cool thing that Verizon did. I will give them that, even though I don't agree with a lot of the other things they do. Anyway, so let's talk about Face ID. When I try to open my phone, it just doesn't even come up. It just doesn't even let me do it. And even when it does show up, it's a 50-50 chance that it's even going to work. The thumbprint was better. I get that, having these different biometric based entry systems to your phone is futuristic, and it's more tailored to the individual so that it's harder for somebody else to break into your phone. I get it. I think it's smart, but I think Face ID was just a little bit ahead of its time. Absolutely needed more testing before it was deployed, because like I said, it never works for me. Almost never. I also feel like the camera is slightly more difficult to get to than previous generations. It took me forever to figure out that you're actually supposed to press this button to get to it, but before, the way that you did it was you flipped it up. And so, okay, there's, user error, of course, that we have to account for. But at the same time, I just feel like a lot of the gestures I use on this iPhone, it takes so much longer to get to the places that I need to go. And also, I feel like it's just not as responsive in terms of when you're using the drop-down search. Let me see if I can pull it up. So using that search and trying to type something in, or whenever I try to get to certain apps, it's just very slow. There's a processing speed error. And so, it's is that an app specific issue? Is that a software RAM issue? I'm not sure, because I'm not a developer for Apple products, but it's definitely an issue to me. What was I going to say about that? I don't know. There's certain usability issues I've noticed on other devices too. I got the Apple Watch. I think this is the 2, because I think they're on the 3 now. I got this in the past, calendar year. I can't remember exactly when. I can't figure out that either. It's just so not intuitive. It works for obviously telling time and the basic stuff that you'd want to do with it, but there are so many things that just aren't intuitive that I know that Steve Jobs would have done much better justice to. And, RIP Steve Jobs, you're kind of a dick sometimes, but overall, you were a very good product designer, so I miss you. But anyway, another thing that happened recently, my fiance Dan also has the iPhone 10, and he got it before me, and it was working, pretty fine, which is why I wanted to get one. But it's recently that we started to notice all these different issues. Another thing that happened to Dan was his phone just suddenly factory resetted, and this was right after we got engaged. And luckily he had put all those photos in a shared cloud drive, so we both have access to them. But otherwise, they would have been gone. So thank you, Apple, for ruining our special moment, almost. But luckily we were smart enough to get past it. What else? So those are kind of the main points that I wanted to touch on. I'm just looking. I have a little list of things to rant about. But those are kind of the main things that I have a problem with in terms of the iPhone X. But I just started thinking that I would want to do this topic for this Facebook Live in the past couple days. So I'm sure there's these other things that I've been internalizing that I haven't put into words yet. Don't even get me started on Siri, because Siri just doesn't even work for me, but that's a cross-device issue that hasn't just been with the iPhone X. At any rate, I think there's a lesson here. Apple's stock price dipped recently because their earnings were less than expected because of things like how they let people replace their batteries and they made the pricing cheaper, a couple months ago. And, the fact that their products are honestly much more expensive to upgrade than they used to be. And so people are trying to make more use out of their devices and make them work longer. I don't think that Apple is in danger of losing their status as like one of the world's richest and most respected companies. But I will say that, it's little things like not caring about the user experience that may eventually push their users to consider other devices. So like for me, I'm probably, unless they really mess it up, I'm probably always going to use Apple computers. I'm using an Apple computer to broadcast this to you right now. Obviously, I have the watch. I have an iPad. I'm obsessed, man. Like there's no going back for me. But at the same time, I feel like when it's time for me to upgrade my phone, I'm going to look more towards like the Google Pixel phone because it still plays with the same environment that I'm used to, which is like Google Cloud, Drive, like all the stuff that matters for me and my work. But it doesn't really matter so much anymore if my phone is compatible with the rest of these products, as long as I have that sort of like cloud interface that's in common. And so, Apple, like, I love you so much. I would love to stick with you, and I would love for my cross-device experience to remain seamless. But if this is the kind of shit that you're going to keep pulling, then I'm done. Maddie out.